They dumped him like trash outside the veterans hospital. No note, no collar, just a cardboard shoebox baking on the sidewalk, sagging from the weight of something barely alive. I saw it twitch out of the corner of my eye, a movement too slow to be wind, too fragile to ignore. I thought it was litter. Then I heard a sound so faint it barely existed. Not a bark, not a cry, just breath. He was a German Shepherd puppy, maybe 4 months old, maybe less. His black and tan fur was matted with dust and dried leaves. Ants crawled across his flank, his mouth hung open, tongue curled like leather, and his eyes, God, his eyes, were wide but hollow, like he'd stopped hoping anyone was coming. It was over 90 degrees in San Antonio that day. People walked past, some glanced, no one stopped. I wasn't supposed to either. I was just another guy heading into therapy, trying to forget the things I'd seen. But something about that box, about him, made everything else disappear. He didn't flinch when I leaned down, didn't lift his head, just blinked once, slow and resigned. "Hey," I whispered. "You hanging on, little guy?" His body was limp when I picked him up. He weighed almost nothing, just bone and air and heat. His back legs dangled wrong, stiff and useless. I felt panic rise in my throat. He didn't even whimper. I ran. Not walked. Ran inside the VA clinic like a madman, shouting for help with a puppy in my arms. Nurses rushed. A volunteer vet tech named Serena met us at the door, and the color drained from her face. "Oh no," she breathed. "He's crashing." They laid him on a towel, started fluids, pressed cool rags to his tiny frame. His gums were pale, his paws cracked and burned, like he'd walked too far on hot concrete before giving up. "No chip, no tag," someone said. "No one's coming." They asked if I'd stay, said he might not make it, and dogs shouldn't die alone. I sat, I didn't know why, I just did. And after a while, after the noise and motion slowed down, the little German Shepherd puppy moved, just barely. He shifted his head and pressed it weakly against my boot. That was it. The moment that broke me. Not when I found him, not when they saved him, but when he reached out. "What's his name?" Serena asked softly. I looked down at that fragile life, dirty, broken, abandoned, and felt something stir in my chest. "Zeke," I said. "His name is Zeke." And maybe, just maybe, mine was about to change too. He didn't stand the next day, or the next. Zeke just lay there, curled in a makeshift bed of towels inside the clinic's quiet room. His breathing had stabilized, but his legs wouldn't move. The German Shepherd puppy had no fight left in him. He didn't cry, didn't resist. He just watched me with those heavy, ancient eyes, like he was waiting for permission to let go. Serena checked his reflexes. "Still nothing in the hind legs," she said, her tone caught between clinical and heartbroken. "Might be nerve damage, malnutrition, or both. We won't know for days." I nodded like I understood, but I didn't. I'd seen soldiers immobilized in the field, heard the weight of silence after impact. But this was a puppy. Just a puppy. I didn't go home that night. I sat beside him until they closed the clinic, and then again the next morning before they opened. I brought coffee. I brought a towel from my truck that still smelled like sun. On the third morning, Serena gave me a look. "You can't keep sitting here forever, you know." I just shrugged. "What if he wakes up alone?" She didn't argue, just handed me a small paper cup. "For you. He's not the only one who looks like he's been hit by a truck." I smiled, the first time in weeks. That afternoon, Zeke tried to lift his head, just an inch, just for a second. It dropped again, but I saw it. So did Serena. "That's something," she whispered. "That's fight." Later that day, when I stepped away to take a call, I returned to find Zeke dragging himself, front legs working, back legs limp, inch by inch across the towel toward the spot where I'd been sitting. He collapsed there, chest heaving, eyes shut tight, and I just stood there, phone forgotten in my hand, throat burning. I sat down, and without hesitation, he rested his chin on my thigh. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, Zeke." And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I cried. Not the quiet kind. Not the kind you wipe away quickly and hope no one sees. The ugly, aching, unraveling kind. The kind that comes from the middle of your chest, the part you don't let anyone touch. Because I saw it now. I saw myself in him. The way he was broken but not gone. Hurt but still trying. Silent but screaming in every breath, "Don't leave me again." And I couldn't. I wouldn't. I didn't know what tomorrow held. The vets didn't promise anything. But I told Zeke that night, as he lay pressed against my leg, asleep for the first time without trembling, "You're not going back to a box, not ever again." The German Shepherd puppy didn't answer, but for the first time, his tail twitched. Once, maybe twice. And it felt like hope. Zeke peed on himself the next morning. He tried to move, but his legs just wouldn't work, and when the urine soaked the towel beneath him, he froze like he expected to be punished for it. I saw the fear in his face. Not shame. Fear. Like someone had already taught him what happened when you made a mess. I dropped to my knees beside him. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered, pulling the wet towel away and replacing it with a clean one. "No one's mad. You're safe now. I promise." He didn't look at me at first, just stared at the wall like he was trying to disappear into it. That broke something in me all over again. Serena came in with a new syringe of vitamins and quietly handed me a warm compress. "Keep talking to him," she said. "Even if he doesn't react, he's listening. Dogs remember tone more than words." So I did. I told Zeke about the dog I'd had as a kid, a big old shepherd named Duke who used to sleep outside my bedroom door. I told him about the Marines, about the day I came home and didn't recognize the sound of my own house anymore, about how quiet used to be my friend and then turned into something I couldn't stand. He didn't respond, not much. But when I talked about Duke, Zeke blinked slower, calmer. That was something. By the end of the week, he could sit up, wobbling, leaning against the wall, but upright. Serena called it a miracle. I called it Zeke. They said he'd need physical therapy if there was any hope for his back legs. Hydrotherapy, support harnesses, time. Maybe months, maybe more. I asked what happened if he didn't recover. Serena paused, then said, "Some people wouldn't take it on. They'd say it's too much." I looked down at the German Shepherd puppy now resting against my boot again, his breathing even, one paw twitching like it was trying to remember how to be strong. "Well," I said quietly, "I'm not some people." That night, when I got home, I cleared a space in the corner of my bedroom and set down a folded blanket. I stared at it a while, thought about the fact that I hadn't let anything or anyone share my space in years. Then I drove back to the clinic. Zeke came home with me. He didn't bark, didn't wag, just lay curled on the passenger seat like it was the first warmth he'd ever known. When we reached the door, I hesitated. My hand shook on the doorknob. For a moment, I was back there, in the dark, with memories I didn't invite, with ghosts I thought I'd locked outside. And then I looked down. Zeke was watching me. Still, waiting, not judging, just trusting me to go first. So I did, and together we walked in. The first night at home, Zeke didn't sleep. Neither did I. He lay on the blanket by my bed, curled so tight it was like he was trying to fold himself into something smaller, something invisible. Every hour or so, I'd hear the scrape of his front paws as he shifted, tried to move, then whimpered softly and gave up. He didn't cry out. Not loud. Just these tiny broken sounds, like apologies in the dark. Around 3 a.m., I got up, pulled my blanket off the bed, and lay down beside him on the floor. Just breathing with him, just letting him know I was there. When I opened my eyes at dawn, his head was resting on my shoulder. That morning, I carried him outside in my arms. His legs dangled, limp as always, but he didn't resist. He just sniffed the air, blinked at the sun, and leaned into me like I was his anchor. I set him gently on the grass in my backyard, a patchy little space half choked by weeds. He looked around, lifted his head high, and for the first time, his tail gave a single wag. That tiny motion nearly dropped me to my knees. Over the next few days, I made ramps out of plywood and cushions. I built a little support sling out of an old backpack strap and a towel. I Googled exercises for canine paralysis. Serena sent me links, tips, encouragement. She never said it outright, but I could hear it in her voice. Not many people went this far for dogs like Zeke. But Zeke wasn't just a dog anymore. He was my reason. Each morning, I lifted him into the harness and helped him take 3 steps. By the 3rd day, it became 5, then 7. On the 5th day, he dragged his back leg just an inch, but he moved it. Not me. I cheered like he'd won the Super Bowl. Zeke just looked up at me with his ears perked and eyes wide, like he wasn't sure what he did right, but he'd do it again if it made me smile. And then came the breakthrough. It was a Thursday. I remember because the air smelled like cut grass and I just refilled his water dish. I set him down for his usual assisted walk, but halfway through, he stopped. Then, slow and shaking, Zeke lifted one back leg and placed it down. Not a drag, a step. I froze. He looked at me as if asking, "Was that okay?" I dropped to the ground, wrapped my arms around him, and laughed. loud and messy and stunned. And that's when it happened. Zeke licked my face. Just once. Just enough. Like he was telling me, I'm not giving up on you either. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't dared admit. This little German Shepherd puppy, discarded, broken, half paralyzed, was healing me just as much as I was healing him. A week later, he stood on his own, just for a second, but it was enough to make me forget how to breathe. Zeke had been trying all morning, shifting his weight in the sling, wobbling on his front paws. His back legs kept collapsing beneath him like they didn't believe in themselves yet. But that day, something changed. He looked up at me. I swear he looked at me, like now, and then he pushed. His legs straightened, trembled, and held. I didn't even realize I was crying until I laughed and tasted salt. He stood there, proud and shaking, tail low but moving, and then he flopped over sideways into the grass like a dropped rag doll. But he stood. He stood. Serena cried when I sent her the video. This German Shepherd puppy has more fight than most humans, she wrote back. Don't let up. He's got something special in him. Yeah, he did, and I was starting to believe that maybe I did too. Every day after that, we walked, not far, not fast. I'd loop the sling under his belly, give him just enough support to try. He'd wobble, lean, stumble, growl in frustration, and then try again. He never gave up. Not once. Neither did I. There were still bad nights. Some loud noise would trigger him. Fireworks, sirens, slamming car doors. He'd flatten against the floor, eyes wide, breath fast, frozen like he was back in some silent kind of hell. And I'd lie beside him, hand on his back, whispering things I used to tell my squad mates during mortar fire. You're okay. I got you. We're not alone anymore. I realized I wasn't just talking to him. At the VA, I stopped skipping appointments, started showing up early, brought photos of Zeke. The other vets began asking about him, the puppy who wouldn't walk, now taking steps. He became a quiet kind of legend around there. Some guys would linger after group just to ask if they could meet him. You should certify him. One of them said, he's already doing the job. I laughed at first. He still pees on his feet. The guy shrugged. So do some of us. But the idea stuck. I started researching therapy dog programs. The requirements were strict: obedience, calm under pressure, responsiveness, control. But Zeke had already learned the hardest lesson: how to survive what tried to break him. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed while he snored at my feet. I looked down at this German Shepherd puppy, this four-legged scrap of second chances, and whispered, "What do you think, Zeke? Want to save some lives?" He didn't wake up, but his tail wagged, once, slow and steady, and I took it as a yes. The day he walked across the clinic floor without the sling, everyone stopped what they were doing. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't fast, but Zeke's back legs held, wobbly, stubborn, determined. Step by crooked step, the little German Shepherd puppy crossed that tile floor like it was a battlefield he'd finally conquered. Serena covered her mouth with both hands. One of the techs actually clapped. Zeke looked confused by the attention. He paused halfway, ears perked, then did something none of us expected. He sat. Just like that. On his own. And I swear to God, he looked proud. I knelt down and opened my arms, and he limped the last 3 steps straight into my chest. Everyone went quiet. Okay, Serena whispered. Let's talk next steps. We started formal training the following week. The certification process was more intense than I thought. Not physically. Zeke was getting stronger by the day, but emotionally. They put him through scenarios meant to test stress responses: crowds, sudden noises, wheelchairs, crying children, even hospital smells. He passed the first 3 without blinking. The 4th, a sudden yell from behind a curtain made him drop. Not bolt, not bark, just drop. Flat to the ground, tail tucked. It was instant, a flash of old fear. I crouched next to him, whispered like I always did, "It's okay, I'm here. We're safe." He didn't move for a long minute. But then he lifted his head, scanned the room, and stood up. That's what made the trainers pause. Not the drop. The recovery. They marked it down. Resilience. Exceptional. At home, we practiced everything. I built obstacle courses in the hallway, played audio recordings of hospital beeps and chatter. I even borrowed my buddy's wheelchair to let Zeke learn to walk beside it. He never backed down. Never once said no. Even on the days he limped so hard I had to carry him to bed, he'd wake up ready to try again. One night, after a longer session than usual, I lay on the floor next to him. He stretched out beside me, eyes half closed, breathing soft. "You know, I said quietly. You don't have to be perfect, just present. Zeke shifted, pressed his nose to my shoulder, and in that moment I realized that's what he'd been giving me all along. Not perfection, not answers, just presence. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man managing his damage. I felt like someone building something new. Because if this broken little German Shepherd puppy could find his legs again, maybe I could find my way back too. The first time Zeke visited the VA hospital with me, I was more nervous than he was. He sat beside me in the passenger seat, harness snug, eyes alert, tail tapping every few seconds against the console like a metronome of quiet confidence. Meanwhile, my palms were sweating, my throat dry. I hadn't walked through those hospital doors without a breakdown in years. Zeke didn't know that, but maybe he did. As we pulled into the parking lot, I glanced over at him. The German Shepherd puppy looked up, tilted his head just slightly like he was checking me. "You're the therapy dog, huh?" I muttered with a shaky laugh. "Well, guess what, hero? We're both gonna need therapy after this." He blinked slowly. No judgment, just presence. Walking through those front doors again was like stepping into a memory I'd worked hard to forget. The hallway smelled the same, that faint mix of antiseptic, coffee, and something I could never name, something sterile and sad. Zeke walked beside me without a leash, close enough that his shoulder brushed my leg. Heads turned as we passed. A few vets nodded, some smiled. One man in a wheelchair actually whispered, "That the one from the story?" Serena had apparently been talking. We reached the rehab wing. A group therapy session was ending. I hovered by the door, unsure, and that's when a young guy, early 20s maybe, sat frozen in his chair, fists clenched, jaw locked. His therapist stood beside him, whispering something I couldn't hear. I don't know what made Zeke move. No command, no cue. But he stepped forward, slow and sure, and sat right in front of the kid. Didn't nudge him, didn't bark, just sat and waited. The room was quiet. Then the kid, shaking, eyes red, reached out and touched Zeke's ear. That was it. Zeke didn't move, just let it happen. The kid broke into tears, shoulders shaking. His therapist knelt beside him, nodding, grounding him. I stood in the doorway, breath held, heart in my throat. That was the first time I saw it. Not hope, not magic. Purpose. Zeke wasn't just surviving anymore, he was working. That night, I took him for a walk in the quiet, empty streets behind my building. The sun was setting, that golden kind of light that makes everything look softer than it really is. Zeke walked strong, confident, legs still stiff, sure, but his. Every step his own. We stopped near the end of the block. He sat, looked up at me. "You know," I said, scratching behind his ear, "I used to think I'd never matter to anyone again." Zeke leaned into my hand. "But you," I swallowed. "You're proof that I was wrong." The German Shepherd puppy didn't answer. But in that stillness, in that shared silence, I felt something settle inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. We were invited to our first official therapy session the following week, a support group for veterans newly diagnosed with PTSD. Most of them were still raw, fresh out of active duty, barely sleeping, barely talking. I knew the look in their eyes because I used to see it in the mirror. Zeke trotted beside me down the hospital corridor like he belonged there. Tail low, ears forward, pace steady. No leash. He didn't need one. That German Shepherd puppy had become more in tune with my energy than most people ever were. We entered the room and the chatter stopped. 8 men and women sat in a rough circle. Some stared. One guy flinched. Another crossed his arms and turned away. The facilitator, a soft-spoken Navy vet named Reggie, gave me a small nod. "Everyone, this is Tom, and this is Zeke." Zeke stepped forward first, as if he knew it was his cue. He didn't rush. He didn't make eye contact. He just moved quietly, slowly, giving space, letting them come to him. One woman blinked hard and whispered, "He's beautiful." Zeke sat near her, not too close, just enough to be seen. His presence filled the room like warmth, and one by one they began to shift. A man with tremors extended a tentative hand. Zeke didn't move, just waited until the fingers brushed his fur, then leaned gently into the touch. Another guy, shoulders tight like coiled wire, exhaled for what felt like the first time all session. No tricks, no barking, no forced affection, just quiet connection. That's when I realized Zeke didn't fix people. He reminded them they weren't broken alone. Afterward, Reggie pulled me aside. "You ever think about speaking, Tom?" I shook my head. "Zeke's the one doing the work." He smiled. Maybe, but you carry it too, and these guys, they need someone who gets it. I didn't answer, because the truth was, I wasn't sure I did get it. How a half-paralyzed German Shepherd puppy abandoned in a cardboard box under the Texas sun could become a lifeline for people barely holding on. And yet, there he was, day after day, session after session, healing by simply being. One evening, after a long group session, I sat with Zeke on the hood of my truck under the stars. He rested his head on my leg, eyes half closed, tail twitching softly. "You do good work, buddy," I whispered. He didn't move, just stayed still. Present. Real. And I remembered the way he dragged himself across that clinic towel, legs useless, body shaking, just to be near me. He never asked for anything, never complained, just gave what he had every single time. That night, I fell asleep on the couch with Zeke curled against my chest, and for the first time since I came home, I didn't dream of war. The request came unexpectedly, an invitation to speak at the annual Veterans Mental Health Awareness Day. They wanted Zeke to attend, of course. Everyone did. But they also wanted me to share our story, to stand on a stage in front of hundreds of people, politicians, doctors, soldiers, and talk about trauma, healing, and a German Shepherd puppy who changed everything. I almost said no. I stared at the email for hours, hand hovering over the keyboard, chest tight. The thought of going back into that place, the spotlight, the vulnerability, made my hands shake. But Zeke had never hesitated. Not once. Not when his body gave up on him. Not when strangers reached for him with trembling fingers. Not when the world had left him behind in a box. He just kept showing up. And if he could do that, so could I. So I said yes. The night before the event, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept cycling through all the worst-case scenarios, stumbling over my words, freezing mid-sentence, breaking down in front of a crowd. I paced the living room until well after midnight. Zeke followed me, quiet and steady, never more than a few feet away. At one point, I stopped and looked down at him. "You're not worried, huh?" I whispered. He blinked, then without a sound, walked over and rested his head against my leg, as if to say, "You've done harder things." The next morning, we walked into the auditorium together. Zeke wore his vest, navy blue with a patch that read "Therapy Dog," working. He held his head high, his gait was strong now, confident, his tail didn't drag anymore. The coordinator guided us backstage. I peeked out through the curtain, rows and rows of faces, cameras, lights. I started to sweat. Then I felt it, warm pressure against my calf. Zeke had leaned into me, just a little, but it was enough. They called our names. I walked to the podium. My boots echoed too loudly in the silence. I stood there, heart pounding, throat dry, 1,000 words jammed in my mouth, and then Zeke padded forward, turned in a slow circle, and lay down at my feet, calm, composed, solid. The audience softened. The tension broke. I took a breath and spoke. I told them about a cardboard box, about broken legs and silent nights, about how this little German Shepherd puppy, discarded by the world, gave me back a piece of myself I thought was gone for good. I didn't cry, not until the very end, and even then, it wasn't grief. It was gratitude. When I stepped off the stage, people lined up to meet him. Vets, spouses, young men who said nothing but dropped to their knees to press their foreheads to his. Zeke took it all in. No barking, no flinching, just stillness and warmth. That night, as I unclipped his vest and set it gently on the hook by the door, I realized something. He didn't need to be a hero. He already was. The call came late one afternoon, just as I was lacing up my boots. A vet named Chris, someone I'd seen around group a few times but never heard speak, had locked himself in his apartment, wouldn't answer his phone, wouldn't come to the door. His brother was panicking. "Can you bring the dog?" the social worker asked. "We don't know what else to try." I didn't ask questions, just said, "We're on our way." Zeke jumped into the truck without hesitation. He always seemed to know when it was serious. No barking, no tail wag, just focus. This German Shepherd puppy, once discarded like garbage, now moving with the calm intention of someone who understood pain, because he'd lived it. When we arrived, the complex was quiet. A few neighbors stood back, watching from porches, eyes wide. A police cruiser sat idle at the curb, lights off, no sirens. The building manager let us in. The door to apartment 3B was closed, locked from the inside. We could hear music playing. Low, repetitive. The kind of sound that wraps around your ribs and doesn't let go. The social worker stood outside the door, eyes red. "He won't speak to anyone. Just keep saying he's not worth fixing. I looked down at Zeke. He was already sitting, staring at that door like he knew someone was bleeding on the other side. Let me try, I said. They hesitated, but stepped back. I knocked once. Chris, I said, keeping my voice low. It's Tom. I brought someone who wants to see you. No answer. I'm not here to fix you, I continued. Neither is he. We don't want you to be alone tonight. A long pause. Then, a faint click. The door cracked open 2 inches. That's all Zeke needed. He pushed his nose through the gap, tail still, ears forward, and waited. No barking, no pushing, just being. Another pause, then the door opened wider. Chris was on the floor, back against the far wall, eyes hollow, shoulders trembling. A picture frame lay shattered beside him. Zeke didn't rush. He walked slowly, 1 step at a time until he reached him, then lay down with a sigh, just inches away, and didn't move. Chris didn't either, not for a long time. Then, as quiet as breath, he reached out, just one hand. Zeke met him halfway. That was all it took. Tears came next. Shoulders shaking, hands in fur, the kind of sobbing that rips through years of silence. I sat across the room, watching. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, Zeke was doing what no human could. He wasn't offering solutions. He was offering presence. And that was enough. Later, as the crisis team arrived and Chris nodded, silent but calm, I clipped Zeke's vest back into place and led him outside. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in soft orange. I looked down at the German Shepherd puppy walking beside me, his steps even, steady. And I realized he hadn't just survived his pain. He had transformed it into healing. For me, for them, for anyone willing to sit beside the broken and stay a while. The day Zeke received his certification, I didn't expect to cry. I told myself it was just a formality, a piece of paper, a patch on his vest, a checklist. But when they called his name, when the coordinator handed me the certificate with Zeke, certified therapy dog, printed in bold at the top, my hands shook. He sat beside me, calm and steady, like he had no idea what it meant. Like he didn't understand he'd just been officially recognized for what he'd already been since the day he pressed his fragile body against my boot on that clinic floor. A healer. The applause in that room wasn't just for him. It was for everything he'd endured, everything he'd overcome, and every silent, broken soul he'd helped along the way, including mine. After the ceremony, we took a walk through the VA gardens. It was quiet, warm, the kind of day that made you feel like the world had space again. Zeke walked without assistance now. His gait still had a wobble, but it was his. He owned it. And somehow it made him look prouder, not weaker. Like every step was a declaration. I'm still here. We passed a bench beneath a jacaranda tree, the blossoms falling like soft purple rain. Zeke paused, nose twitching in the breeze. I sat down, he rested his head on my lap, and I let myself think about the box again, that first moment. Hot sun, dry fur, ribs too visible, breath so faint it barely moved the air. I'd found him in pieces, but the truth? He found me the same way. I hadn't realized how far I'd fallen. Not until this little German Shepherd puppy began piecing me back together without saying a single word. And now people looked at him and saw hope, calm, trust. What they didn't know was that behind every soft blink and gentle touch was fire. This dog had fought for every breath, every step, every single heartbeat. And in doing that, he taught me how to fight too. Not with fists, but with presence, with patience, with love that asked for nothing in return. As we sat under that tree, I ran my hand down his back and whispered, "We did it, Zeke." He looked up at me, not with excitement or pride, but something deeper, something steady, something unshakable, like he already knew. Sometimes healing doesn't look like a miracle. Sometimes it looks like a trembling step, a soft blink in a crowded room, a German Shepherd puppy pressing his head into your chest when you don't have the words to say you're not okay. Zeke was never supposed to survive. He was thrown away, forgotten, paralyzed. A tiny heartbeat left in a box outside a hospital. But this little guy's journey from abandonment to rehabilitation shows how important nonprofit rescue groups really are. Because what they saved wasn't just a dog. They saved a lifeline. Zeke now works full-time as a certified therapy dog, serving veterans in crisis, visiting hospitals, and sitting quietly beside men who once believed they'd never smile again. He doesn't ask questions. He doesn't offer advice. He simply stays. And sometimes that's enough to save a life. Caring for a rescued puppy is more than love. It's responsibility. It's pet care. It's knowing that even the smallest, most broken creature can carry something the rest of us forgot how to hold: hope. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share. Every time this video is shared, more people understand what rescue really means, and more dogs like Zeke get their second chance. Join our Brave Paws family. Be their voice. Be their hope.